Hey, and welcome back to our tiny house. When designing this house, one of the most important aspects for me was to take it off the grid. And today, we're going to talk all about how we made that happen. Before I talk about the systems that we have integrated into our home to take our house off the grid, I really want to talk about why it was important to me to do that. For me, a big part of living off the grid has always been about living intentionally and taking responsibility for my own consumption. It's really been about learning to work in synergy with the natural world to meet our needs. When you're living off the grid, you become responsible for generating the things that you need. You become responsible for your own power. You become responsible for your own water. And I really enjoy that responsibility and the relationship that it helps me build with the natural world. The resources that you consume are what nature is providing you. If you are utilizing electricity and you have an abundance of electricity in your house, it's because you have an abundance of solar light. The amount of water that you consume is completely controlled by the amount of rainfall that you're getting in your environment. So you really do become hyper aware of what is going on in the natural world. I love that feeling that when it rains, you're so happy about it because you know that your water tanks are filling up. And there really is something very special about that natural connection. When I started this tiny house project, a big part of the whole journey for me was all about reducing my cost of living. And so being off the grid was a really important aspect of that. Not having those power bills, those water bills coming every month was a huge motivating factor for me. And even though our off the grid systems added some upfront cost, because we did it all in a very manageable way, it really didn't add that much to the build, and the system has quickly paid for itself, really. So all that said and done, let's talk about the actual systems that we integrated to make our off-the-grid lifestyle possible. Now, the first thing that you need to remember when it comes to designing an off-the-grid system is really to design for your needs. But the more that you can pare down those needs, the easier it will be for you to create an efficient system. So realistically, going off the grid all starts with the ability to reduce your consumption as much as possible. That can come from behavioral adaptations like reducing the amount of water that you consume, but it can also come from making really good decisions like choosing energy efficient devices to incorporate into your house. So with all that being said, let's start talking about the actual systems that we have in our tiny house. All of the power in our tiny house comes from the sun. On the roof of this tiny house, we have 4 300-watt solar panels. At peak, that gives us 1,200 watts of energy production, which is ample energy for what we need in this house. Now, when I designed this house, I was a complete amateur. And I did design in one fatal flaw for the house, and that is to create a north-facing aspect. Obviously here in the southern hemisphere, our predominant sun comes from the north. And so I thought that having all of our solar panels on the northern side of the house was going to be a smart thing to do. Except it's a tiny house and there really is no such thing as a north-facing aspect on a house that can move and always will change its place. So in the current parking space, the only way to really get the house to fit here well meant that it was facing west, which means that our panels are actually only really getting afternoon sun. If this was going to be a permanent parking spot for the house, I would augment that by also placing panels on the east side of the house. That way you get energy generation in the morning and in the afternoon. But I haven't had to do that because even though we are lacking in the efficiency of how well the system could be performing, because I had overspec'd the system so much for the house, it means that we still actually get ample energy for most of the year. Occasionally in the winter when we don't have so much sunlight, I will have to plug in the house just as a little bit of a booster for the batteries, but I've only had to do that a couple of times. Under the tiny house, we have our battery box. We have 520 amp hours at 24 volts. That's the system that runs this house. So that's the equivalent of having 1040 amp hours at 12 volts. Now that's actually a lot of power storage. And the reason that I overspec'd the system was twofold. Firstly, it means that we have an abundance of energy reserve to draw from when we have extended periods of cloud. But the other thing that it does is it helps to protect the life of the batteries because you're not having to cycle them and drain the batteries as much as frequently. So even though that was more of an upfront cost, what it meant in the long run is that my batteries will last longer and you're extending the life of the whole system. Now, let me show you inside the cupboard where the whole brains of our solar operation are. So this is where all the fun stuff lives. Our chargers, our controllers, all of the fuses and that good stuff. Now, talking about things that I would change about this system, if I could get all of this outside of the house, I would. And the main reason for that is the noise that you're hearing right now, which is the fan. This fan noise is coming from our solar charger, and it means that throughout the day, this is always cycling, keeping this unit cool. But it does actually create a little bit of noise in the house, which personally I would prefer to get outside, or at least insulate this more. I wasn't really aware of how noisy that unit was going to be when I got it. And there we go, it's just stopped cycling and we have nice quiet again. So to make everything really efficient, most of the devices in our house run on 24 volts. So that's the native voltage that is created from our battery system. So our fridge, our lights, the water pump, all of the essential elements run natively off of the 24 volt system. We also have this unit down here, which is a transformer. That steps our 24 volt system down to a 12 volt circuit that also runs throughout our house. The 12 volt circuit powers things like our USB plugs as well as our 12 volt plugs. And the reason that we incorporated that was really because a lot of DC appliances are 12 volt rated. And so it just meant that we would have the ability to use those in the house really easily if we wanted to. Above the transformer, we have the inverter. The inverter is what changes our electricity from 24 volts DC into 240 volts AC. So that's what all of our normal residential appliances run on here. So overall, our solar system works really well. And the only thing that in the current place I would change to add to that is if I wanted to really increase the efficiency, I would put some east-facing panels on there as well. But right now we generate enough electricity that pretty much for 99% of the year, we are sitting pretty in this house. Next, I want to talk about our rainwater harvesting, but before I do, I want to share with you one really important aspect that we have incorporated into this house to really make our whole off-the-grid water situation better. All throughout the home, we've really tried to incorporate both energy and water-saving devices wherever possible, such as our low-flow shower head. This shower head uses around 6 liters of water a minute, which is about half of what the average shower head consumes. That means not only are you not utilizing as much water in the home, it also makes dealing with water as Greywater a lot easier as well, because you just don't have the same volumes to deal with. So just swapping over to efficient devices like that can make all the difference in your home. Now, let's go outside and I'll show you the water tank and how all those systems work. So this is where all of our rainwater collection happens right now. Our tiny house has a roof area of about 15 square meters. That's about 160 square feet. Amazingly, in our climate zone, that translates to being able to capture, on average, about 30,000 liters or 8,000 gallons of water every single year, which is quite remarkable for such a small roof. Obviously, one of the best ways to extend that is to build on awnings or other things to your house to increase that surface area to collect more rainwater. But as this isn't the permanent place for our house, we haven't set any of that up yet. So all of the rainwater is collected in the gutters and then channeled down through these downpipes into a 200-litre stainless steel water tank. Now, a 200-litre tank is really, really small. This thing quickly fills up with a single rainfall. You can see we had some rain this morning and already the tank is pretty much overflowing. If this were permanently set up, I would be adding a much larger water tank to this tiny house. Anywhere between 10 and 30,000 litres is probably much more suitable for full-time living. And certainly in the future, when this house is set up in a more permanent location, I will be significantly adding to the storage of our water. Right here, we are in a very urban environment. We do have access to mains water, so our water consumption is heavily augmented with town supply at the moment. Underneath, we have a simple water pump that pumps the water into the house, and we also have a filter, which is really important. If you are collecting water off your roof and if you're storing it in a tank, filtration is really important. So make sure you design your system to have really good water filtration. Once the water is used in the house, the next aspect, of course, is Greywater. Now, we utilize a composting toilet in the house, so for that reason, we don't have to worry about black water because all of the really nitty-gritty stuff is contained within the composting toilet. We make sure that we utilize only eco-friendly detergents and soaps in the house, things that are easily biodegradable and Greywater friendly. You can actually seek out Greywater friendly cleaning products for your house, and I highly recommend that you do that. So once the water is consumed in the house, it goes into a simple grease trap, and then we have created a soak pit here, and over in this area I have created a little bit of a drainage funnel where I've also taken the permaculture concept of a banana circle and I've modified that a little bit. Bananas are obviously very, very thirsty plants and they like to suck up lots of moisture. So these bananas have been in now for about 9 months, and we're in spring now and they're really just starting to come up, which is very, very exciting. Again, when this tiny house lives in a much more permanent spot, I will be investing in a much more comprehensive Greywater treatment system. Currently, all of the water heating in the house at the moment is done with our gas calefont, which we just hook up to normal 9 kg LPG bottles. I had initially designed the tiny house to use a solar thermal water heater, and we had tried installing that in the house, but it really just didn't work. We didn't really have enough roof space to make that work efficiently and to be able to have enough solar panels for our energy. So I have shelved that for a future project, and once the tiny house is set up, as I say, in a more permanent location, one of the things that I'll be trying to include back into the house is the solar thermal water. Heating and cooling in a tiny house are really important. Although what's really interesting is because the space is so small and well insulated, it is incredibly easy to heat. For heating, we just have a simple little sparky wood stove. That's a 10 kilowatt wood stove that really cooks us out of this house. So we actually have to be very careful with how we use that. For cooling, most of the time it's pretty okay in here. We have a lot of passive cooling just through airflow and window ventilation, but we do have the ability just to plug in a simple 12-volt fan if we need more. Obviously, if you live in a much warmer climate, you may want to look at incorporating something like air conditioning. That can still be done really well if you're off the grid. Even though it's quite an energy intensive thing, you just have to make sure that you are designing for that when you create your solar system. Okay, so there are the basics of the off-the-grid systems in our tiny house. This is something that I'm really excited to grow and experiment with in the future. When you do start playing with off-grid technologies, it becomes a little bit of an obsession and you're always sort of trying to dial in efficiencies and improve on the systems, because it can be quite exciting looking after all of this stuff yourself. So it's something that I really enjoy and I can't wait to do more of in the future. When it comes to the cost of our solar system, I would say all up, I spent around 12,000 New Zealand dollars. So that's around 8,000 US dollars. So that's for the system which I have here. It can certainly be done cheaper and it can certainly be done more expensively depending on what you're trying to accomplish in your house. In today's video, we really have only scratched the surface of all of these off-the-grid systems. But the one takeaway that I want you to have from this video is that going off the grid doesn't have to be this daunting task. It really can be a fun adventure. It is a tremendous learning curve. There's no question about that. But there are always people out there who are willing to lend a hand and share their information with you. So my advice is, if this is something that you think you would like to give a go, just do it. Power your house with the sun, enjoy your own rainwater, and deepen your connection and synergy with the natural elements. I want to say a huge thank you to EcoFlow and their incredible Delta Max unit for sponsoring this video and helping to make what we do possible. Now this here is a unit that right from the first time I saw it, I was very excited about. I'm really interested in off-the-grid living, off-the-grid technology, and I am the first person to geek out over really cool, well-designed devices like this one here. When I started playing with this unit, one of the very first things that come to my mind was, I wish that something like this was around when I lived in my tent. Back then I had a super simple solar setup that was running off a 140 watt panel, and a unit like this would have made living out there an absolute dream. This unit is completely comprehensive. It can charge both off of solar as well as mains power. It offers an inbuilt inverter, which means you can either utilize native DC power or you can plug in and use any of your normal residential household devices with AC power. A unit like this takes going off the grid and makes it plug and play. For that reason, I could see this being hugely popular with anybody who is a van lifer, who wants power on their boat, or anyone who is wanting a small and simple off-the-grid solution, this is a fantastic option for them. When it comes to easy mobile power, I could really see this becoming a huge part of our on-the-road travel filming kit. Quite frequently, we are filming in really remote, hard-to-reach locations where power isn't always available to us. So having a unit like this that we can keep to charge our drone batteries or our camera batteries is going to be really fantastic. And even if you do live in a grid-connected home, having a unit like this that can provide you with a reliable power source can be really important. If there's a storm or a power cutout or anything like that, having one of these charged up in your home means that you can always keep your essential devices running. EcoFlow has an annual holiday sale where you can get your friends and family the gift of lasting power for a better price up until the 31st of December. You can get your EcoFlow Delta or other EcoFlow products up to $650 off by heading to the link in the description of this video. So click the link in the description of this video and make sure your life stays powered.